So, Brian, when you started the company in 2016, what was the opening that you saw in the market?
Yeah, so back in 2016, a bunch of us had actually worked together at a prior startup that did mobile app engagement and analytics. And we had sold that company to Twitter and had worked at Twitter. And while at Twitter, had seen how important messaging was and how much brands wanted to use messaging. And initially the idea was let's go to companies and give them a way to use text messaging in order to communicate with their workforce as well as with their customers. And we went through and pitched that a bunch of times. And we found out that people were not as interested in using text to communicate with their workforce, but they were very interested in being able to reach consumers and potential customers through text. They were struggling to reach consumers in traditional channels, whether it be phone calls or email or even in ads, and they really just thought the opportunity of using text and reach them on a mobile phone through chat would be great. So that customer feedback is what got us to build the company.
Were you focused on e-commerce from the get-go, or?
Yeah, so we did focus on e-commerce from a very early stage. I think that even though you might have a massive TAM and many companies you can sell it to, it's a lot easier to get it right for one subvertical of company and to really make sure everything from your marketing to the products you decide to build to the way you manage those customers to the way that you sell those customers. Everything I think is a lot easier to do on one subvertical and have a team focused on. And then over time, of course, you can begin to cover off on new verticals and things like that. But I really think you get a focus to start.
What was the competitive landscape like when you got started?
Yeah, so when we were starting, there really were very few e-commerce companies that were doing text messaging. So, I think that the real competition for us was convincing people that this was a product, a solution they wanted. So, ultimately, I think we really focused our pitch on the problem, right? And I think you really have to sell the problem, particularly if you think you are early to a market. So, we knew the problem very well. The problem was that marketers want to make more money and they want a better way to reach their customers, right? There are many potential solutions to that, but we really led in our emails and our outreach and our marketing, everything really focused on that problem. And once they agreed, yes, that's a problem I want to solve, we say, great, well, we've got a solution that's working for some other people, and it's text messaging. And it was funny because I think there were so many companies that started doing it not because they thought they wanted text. I don't think anyone wanted text in 2017, but they wanted to solve their problem, and we thought we had a pretty good solution to that problem.
How were you selling the problem? Like, what were the mediums you were using for it?
Yeah, just how you're engaging the buyer, right? So I spend a lot of time thinking about what goes in that subject line on the LinkedIn message, what goes in the subject line on the email, what's the first couple sentences you say when you go to an event and you meet them at a booth of a conference or whatever it is, right? And I think really approaching it from, are you interested in potentially finding a new top three revenue channel that's growing really fast for brands like XYZ? And the answer in most cases to that is yes. And then once you get agreement that they have the right problem, you want to solve their problem, then I think providing your solution to that problem is easy. I think too many people jump straight to the solution.
Tell me about going from zero to first million in revenue. What kind of channels worked? What helped you, reach that milestone?
Yeah, so for us, it was very inside sales SDR driven. I believe in hiring three or four SDRs at a company from the earliest days, and really pre-product. I think a team should have three or four SDRs. I think that often entrepreneurs hold off on hiring sales way too long, and they just go straight to building. They just go straight to building products, straight to getting stuff out. And they don't realize that once you start building, it's really hard to tear that down. It's really hard to change direction on real product feedback. And then what you have then is you have a solution and looking for a problem, and that's not where you want to be, right? So I think the beauty of having a large inside sales team, couple people from the early days, is that you can go get a lot of feedback fast, figure out what the real problem is, and then build your solution accordingly.
Do you still think that every startup should hire SDRs today? Because it's gotten harder out there.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there is no I think that look, think about it from an expense standpoint. An SDR might cost 50, 60K base plus maybe 20K in additional bonus. So you're looking at maybe selling 70K or something like that, right? Go out and try to hire one engineer right now. And you're probably talking hundreds, if not more than that, and it's very hard to get them and retain them. And then what's the output that you get from that, right? What are you going to have them go build? Well, that's what the SDR team is going to tell you. To me, I think that it's very much a research team, even more than it is just a sales team on what to build. So I think that you can get three SDRs often for the price of one engineer, and you can figure out what your company is going to build. So I think it's a no-brainer to get that early.
Once you hit the impossible landmark of 1 million, then the journey of 1 to 10 million, like really starting to scale the business up, how did marketing or customer acquisition strategy evolve, and how did your product strategy evolve?
I think it comes back to the size of the problem and how big of a problem is it? Is it a problem where people are willing to spend a bunch of money to solve it? I think that there are three types of software companies out there. There are companies that make money for businesses, there are companies that save money, and there are companies that don't do either. And I think if you're in the first bucket that makes money, you're going to grow fast because you're going to get prioritized, right? And I think that sort of that step of saying a million to five to 10 to 25 to 100 to 200 to 400, that we've been through, like, I think that that's a lot easier, really, than it is figuring that out for something where they don't make money. Make money, number one, distant second, save money. And then third, if it doesn't do either, you better figure out how you're tying it to one of the first two. Because if you can't make that really clear, it has to be a burning on fire problem to get there. Now, look, there's exceptions to that rule, right? You can take a company like, say, Slack. I'm just looking at it on my desktop, right? How does Slack make money or save money? No, it's like a burning problem. But that was a business where it kind of just took off all of a sudden when a bunch of people started using it, and it kind of grew on its own. So there are different versions of this model. I'm thinking more, how are we looking at it from mid-market to enterprise SaaS sales type of business?
Hmm. When was there like a tipping point where the market became, let's say, problem aware and they started to seek out SMS on their own?
Yeah, biggest snowball for us came in the winter of 2019. So we worked our butts off to get a whole bunch of name brands, just through blood, sweat, and tears, got them to try out the channel. Because we offer free trials of the product because it's not a line item someone already had. Make it easy, reduce the friction. I think way too much enterprise SaaS sales revolves around this idea of long-term contracts and making it really hard to try, which makes no sense. So make it really easy to try, and easy to try, easy to buy. And we just would get these major brands trying it out. And that was the first holiday season where major brands were partnered with us and doing it. And what happened was all these other marketers and brands and folks saw major brands doing this and said, "Whoa, there's some major marquee brands doing SMS. What am I missing here? What's going on?" And I remember we came back from holiday 2019 and we just booked an incredible amount of demos in Q1, and you were kind of thinking, "Oh my God, we're on top of the world." And then, of course, COVID came, and for a couple months, we thought this could be really bad for the business. But then, of course, ecom took off, and it did even better. So, but I think that really was the turning point for us, was holiday 2019.
And from there on out, did the increase in, like, let's say, or organic inbound leads become more prevalent compared to like outbound? How does the channel mix? How has the channel mix evolved?
Yeah, so for us, we still have a really strong outbound organization. We have had to pick up an inbound, but I think that if your outbound team is properly staffed and doing their work, I think it still is majority outbound. If you're selling mid market enterprise and you've got the CAC LTV ratios, then it makes sense. You're selling long tail, it's going to be harder to make the CAC LTV make sense. If you're doing mostly outbound, you got to have an inbound type of model. So it depends on who your customer is. For us, it's going to be profitable to have a team getting those demos because the CAC LTV ratio is where it is.
In B2B SaaS, in most categories, what's happening is, over time, competitors become more similar to each other. In the end, everybody has every feature. They say very similar things about themselves on their website, in their marketing. How are you thinking about this, and in standing out in the sea of sameness, differentiation?
Yeah, look, I think that you need to be clear about what you do different. And I think at a point you have to say, we're not right for every buyer, right? I think for our company, we make it clear, like, look, we want to be the absolute best product in market. We're not going to be the cheapest. We're not going to work with every type of business that's, the super long tail or anything like that. We just want to have the absolute best product. So that's where we focus. And then secondly, I think when you're building your products, you need to be thoughtful about how am I building products and features that can leverage my network effects over time. So what am I able to build? What am I uniquely able to build because of my scale, because of my knowledge, because
Mhm.
of what I built over time, that is going to be hard for the competition to copy. And you need to be real about it because, how long is that moat really going to last? The reality is that very few companies have any moat at all. And other than Google and a couple other companies out there long term, I don't think any companies have anything. So, you need to really be thoughtful about what kind of moat can you build, how long is it going to last, and where can you make those investments. And I think for a lot of software companies, it's network effects based on the companies that they've worked with and how you can leverage that across your customer base.
The category that you play in, I guess, what do you call it? Is it mobile marketing, or
Yeah, look, we'd say communication and marketing.
how, in your opinion, how mature is this market? Have the market leaders emerged, and the top five is gonna, is well established, and there's a bunch of also rans, or is it still, are the pieces still up in the air?
I think the pieces are totally up in the air. And I think we live in a world today where changes faster than it ever has before. I've we had a thing we looked at when we raised our first round of money back in 2017, 2016, 2017. And it laid out who we thought the competitive landscape was, right? We dusted that off the other day and we showed it at all hands to make a point. I said, look at this chart. These are the 20 something companies that we said were competition. Today, two of them are still relevant companies. Two of them are companies that we actually still see in market and exist and are relevant. The other 18 don't even most of them didn't even exist anymore. They got bought, they ended, they went another direction, whatever it is, right? So the market is changing faster than it ever has changed before. Small groups of people can build software really quickly. The market is so dynamic. You have to continue to move really fast, I think faster than ever before. And I don't think that would have happened 10 years ago. I've worked in startups for a bit now, and the companies I worked at 10, 15 years ago, you would see that landscape, and 5 years later, landscape was the same. So I think we're seeing the landscape change now, and I think actually larger, bigger changes are going to happen faster, right? I think again, you're going to go 5 years from now, and it's going to be materially different.
So, thinking, 5 to 10 years into the future, what kind of bets are you making, to maybe build moats, or have upper hand?
Yeah, look, I think we got to build real moats, and I think we also need to figure out how the customer problem is changing, right? I talked earlier about the importance of understanding that customer problem. And I think that, yes, you got that problem right at a point in time, but that problem is also constantly changing. And what happens is companies, I think, they build a product for a problem, they have the solution to the problem, but then the problem changes and they don't change their solution. And then a couple years later, the problem's totally different, solution doesn't work anymore, or there's versions of the solution that are much better for it, and then the buyer goes buy the new thing. So you got to be keeping really close track on how the problem is changing and changing your solution accordingly.
What are you doing at Attentive to keep tabs on how the problem is changing?
I think you got to talk to customers. Number one, I think you got to hear feedback from, survey, know where their heads at, what they're feeling. Got to really have your finger on the pulse of what it's like to be your buyer, and understand that buyer and understand that buyer's problems.
So you said 18 of the 20 companies are like maybe have dropped off the earth or whatever happened to them. So there have been companies that maybe started around the same time as you but did not succeed. So retroactively, what do you think? Why did you succeed when some others didn't?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a combination of, I think, execution and strategy selection. So, on the strategy side of things, just as an example, years ago, when we started, a lot of other businesses were focused on Facebook Messenger and doing things in tools like that. And we experimented with that too. And we just, at the time, we saw it performed a lot worse than SMS. So we said, you know what, it's a lot worse in performance. Even though it's kind of a hot area right now, it just doesn't work nearly as well. And when we surveyed buyers were kind of not also super jazzed about it. So, we decided not to focus there. And I think a lot of other companies at the time focused on Facebook and subsequently saw their business flatline or go out of business or whatever it is. And then on the execution side, the bottom line is that executing and scaling a business is very hard. And there's a lot of mistakes you can make along the way, and they kind of add up pretty quickly. And I think you've just seen other businesses that run into standard execution issues. We've certainly had our own host of problems we've run into, but we've been lucky to have a team that's been doing it for a while, and a lot of us worked together for over a decade doing startups, and hopefully try not to fall into the same hole over and over again.
Can you tell me more about those typical execution problems you see companies face?
I think well, it depends a little on stage. I think when you're trying to find product market fit, that's probably where the most businesses kind of go off the handle. And I think that is where the inclination of just kind of building and trying to make it work, and then just building more and more, rather than selling and listening to customers, is spending time with customers, is where I think the most businesses make mistakes. I think you'll hear companies say like they have a vision, and it's like, that is great, and God bless you if that works because you just happen to have a vision that aligned with the buyer's problem. But a lot of those visions don't align with real buyer problems, and if you don't align with real buyer problems, you're not going to have a successful company. And of course, I'm more focused on B2B. We could talk about B2C too in that same context. Like, I mean, look, I think there's a reason there's so many developer tool companies, because engineers like making things for themselves, right? They're the buyers. So there's like tons of companies that make things for their own buyers. So that can make sense. I think that's kind of a way to jump ahead on this. But I think early on, companies need to have more honest conversations with buyers. And I think a lot of companies will sit there and say, "Oh no, I talk to the buyers. I got intros from friend of friends, and They told me this is awesome. They told me this is definitely what they want. No one gives, like, especially to a friend of a friend or things like that, all the feedback is total BS, right? They don't tell you really what they think. It's actually, you very seldom do you actually get honest critical feedback. Everyone just smiles and says great, because who wants to tell someone their baby's ugly, right?
Mhm.
So I think that it's pretty rare to get that type of feedback. You only really get it when you a pitch people that you get through sales, when you're actually trying to sell something, and b, if you ask questions at the end of the pitch that are like, okay, all that sounds good. On a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being the lowest, 10 being sign me up now and I'll buy this. What's your rating for this product? And up to that question, you might have thought, wow, this person loves this. And then the person will go, oh, it's a 6. And you're like, whoa, I thought we were a 10. Like, why is it a 6? And they're like, well, I don't even like XYZ. So, the type of questions you ask, and the way that you're
Mhm.
trying to really learn and be skeptical rather than just check the box on your vision, I think can have a tremendous impact on that early 0 to 1. And then once you have product market fit, then that's all about execution, really, on being able to scale a business and keep things on the rails, which it can go off the rails pretty quickly. But that's really, to me, more blocking and tackling.
What are you guys doing today on the brand and marketing front to compete and win?
I think that people make marketing a lot too hard on themselves often. I think that, how many times do I go to SaaS company, software company websites, and I spend a couple minutes on it, and I say, I have no idea what the F this company does, right? Like, how often does that happen? And it's like, look, marketing are inherently really smart, creative people. And I think that they overcomplicate things, right? You try to get cute, you try to say a new approach, a new way on whatever it is. When you go to the website, it should say, either in the early phase, in the product market fit phase, I think it should just say the problem as a big headline, and then the solution in little type under it. And then when you reach the point, like we talked about, when it starts to snowball and people actually are convinced they want to buy the solution, not just the problem, then it's a combination of big solution in the front and then problem below it. But I'm still blown away by how many companies, they decide someday, what we're going to do? We're going to make our corporate website imperceptible what our company actually does. And, that makes the job so much harder. You go to our website today and you'll say, it just says the most comprehensive text message marketing solution. That's what we do. Right? Like, and then you'll see the way we solve the problem in the subhead. But the headline just says what we do, the solution. I think people get away from the problem, the solution. They try to get cute, and it's really hard to know what the heck the business actually does.
You've been doing this business for a while, have picked up lessons learned along the way. So, if you had to, pass on three or so pieces of wisdom to a fellow B2B SaaS founder, what would you say?
I would say sell first. I'd say once you sell first before building, really understand the problem. I think once you're there and you're ready to scale, I would hire an in-house person to run recruiting as early as possible. Like, first person after co-founding team type of early. Like, I would co-found 100% with a person who just runs recruiting and only does recruiting, because there's a common view of, well, it's all about the people and the team, and I think that's 100% true. It is all about the people and the team. But then it's amazing how many companies you'll say, okay, it's all about the people and the team. How do you recruit and build talent? Oh, well, the CEO does that, and we hired an outside firm. Wait, you just outsourced the thing that you say is the most important part of the company? So I think that having a full-time awesome person to run recruiting will raise the bar on those first 50 hires tremendously. And yes, you can tell me it's a CEO's job. The CEO should spend time doing that. They absolutely should. But guess what? The CEO also has 8 other things they should be doing. And if you have a full-time person focused on making that funnel great, making the candidate experience great, really being thoughtful about who comes in, what the culture is, etc., you are going to have such a higher bar for the people you hire. I think that's probably one of the top pieces of feedback I give, because these are things that, amazing, when I talk to founders, they say, we're holding off on sales, or we don't want to bring recruiting in house yet. And it's like those are the things. Go first on them. I would pick them up very very early. So those are two little pieces of help. I didn't give three, but those are two.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.